Welcome to Point Blank, brought to you by Fitz Roofing. I'm Brandon Strange of Sports Map Houston. That guy right there is Joel Blank of the Killer Bees, which you can hear weekdays noon to 3 on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 FM. Hey, anytime on podcast, on your podcast provider of choice. Joel, welcome in. This week we got probably one of the least shocking bits of news. A report from Shams Charania saying that the Rockets and John Wall had both mutually agreed to part ways. They're going to try to find a way to deal John Wall in a trade if somehow. We've heard some teams rumored to be in talks, but there is an argument to be made that John Wall is currently the best available point guard that's out there. I just want to know if you think there's a trade scenario in which the Rockets can make a deal without having to eat another crappy contract or deal away more draft equity, because both of those scenarios would seem like non-starters for a team that's coming off their first draft of a rebuild.
Yeah, I think, Brandon, there's a lot of things that have to be factored in. It's probably going to take multiple teams, because if you're the Rockets, you're going to be more than willing to part with some of the other veterans I mentioned, Eric Gordon, even a Christian Wood, along with John Wall. But what you aren't going to be willing to do is mortgage any more of the farm that Daryl Morey already gave away before he got out of town by taking away more draft picks, more young assets that could turn into contributing factors in the rebuild of this team. So therefore, you don't want to give up any draft picks in the process like you had to do with Chris Paul. The Chris Paul deal showed you that a John Wall trade is possible, but in order for it to be probable, you have to get other teams involved to give the team that's taking on John Wall young assets or draft picks, while you potentially give up more veteran players, but are only looking to take back young players and draft picks.
Well, we know that the trade deadline is usually an impetus for teams to pay more or to give up more in a trade, because there's pressure either to be that, they feel like they're one piece away, or they maybe need to keep up to keep pace with other teams who have made other deals. So perhaps we could see a scenario in which he's dealt the trade deadline. Do you think we could see that kind of a scenario in which maybe it's like Iguodala, where Iguodala sat at home until it got closer to the deadline and then you get more for him at the deadline? Do you think that's possible?
I think it's possible. I think from a John Wall perspective, you got to keep working out. You got to be ready to go, and you've got to show teams that are interested in you at the trade deadline, if that scenario pops up, that you are a plug-and-play type guy. Like the minute they make this move, it's probably a team that's fighting for home court advantage or fighting for a playoff spot and thinks you could be the difference. That means they don't have time to wait. If they make the move for you, especially at that price tag, then you better be ready to play immediately, which means you've got to prime yourself for that opportunity. You can't sit back and then say, I'll get into shape and it'll take me a month once you make the move for me. That's not going to cut it. So the key for a contending team or a playoff team or a potential playoff team to go after John Wall is the minute we get him, we can play him. And that means there's going to be a lot of responsibility on John Wall to stay in top shape.
The flip side of this is maybe it's not a trade that leads to John Wall leaving town. Maybe it is a buyout. I want to talk to you more about that. But before I do that, give us a word from Fitz Roofing.
Fitz Roofing is the best roofing company in the city of Houston, bar none, and it's not even close. And the reason why is they have all the bests for you, but it starts with the best warranties, the best ratings. They use the best products, and they do all of it by a free, no obligation inspection that starts the process and costs you absolutely nothing. They do roofs for commercial buildings like your work. They do them for your house. They repair roofs, but more so than that, they do home repairs. They do fences in your yard. And the main thing is you can call them at 832-521-3001 for any of those things, or maybe a lot more, and they can come to you and tell you what they can do. Then they go back on their way and keep doing the rest of their jobs. You want them to come back, you make the appointment, and before, during, and after the sale, they do fantastic work. And like I said, with the best ratings in the business. Check them out today. It's Fitz Roofing, making a difference, one home at a time.
So part of Shams' reporting said there's been no discussion of a buyout just yet. But if a deal can't get done and there aren't obvious trade partners out there to do a deal, maybe they just can't bring in that third team, like you said, do you see a scenario in which maybe John Wall gets a little antsy? Maybe he gets a little desperate to get out of town because he wants to go get with a contender. Do you see him maybe taking a buyout on a supreme discount?
See, that's the big thing, Brandon. That's the $1 million question, literally millions and millions of dollar question. Because if you're Tillman Fertitta, you've taken so many hits financially in the last couple of years. You're still paying Daryl Morey and Tad Brown, which you don't like doing. You didn't want to do the same thing when it came down to Mike D'Antoni. That's why you made him a lame duck coach. You think you're going to be comfortable in taking on $70, $80 million of John Wall's contract and making him happy by going where he wants to go? Been there, done that with James Harden. John Wall is going to have to give it to get it, is in essence what it comes down to. He's going to have to give up salary to get out of town. Otherwise, there's no incentive for this Houston Rockets team to do what he wants like they did when they appeased James Harden, because they're not trying to be good until at least 2 years down the road when Wall's contract expires. So if they just play their cards right and eat Wall's salary and keep him away from this team, win for the Rockets, because they're getting all the minutes and the playing time and the shots they need for their young core, and they get the money when they really truly need it, which in a couple years you see this young core mature, develop, and maybe there's a player or two in free agency that make the difference between making the playoffs or not, winning the division or not, or going further. Therefore, Wall's contract and that big dollar amount will expire at exactly the right time. So it's all in John Wall's lap. If you want to give it up from your pocketbook perspective to get out of town, so be it, and it better be a good chunk. Otherwise, I don't see Tillman Fertitta and the Rockets willing to play ball with him at any kind of level in which they absorb the majority of the contract and get nothing in return.
You've been saying for quite a while that Wall and or Gordon would likely be gone. So this is the first domino to fall, or at least tentatively. Is this a harbinger of the next move to happen? Could we see Eric Gordon gone? And let me be more specific. Will we see Eric Gordon on this team after the trade deadline this year?
No, and I don't think you'll see Eric Gordon if they play their cards right before the regular season starts. I think that Indiana wanted him on draft day. They just couldn't get the specifics of the deal done that made sense for both parties. But a contract that looked untradeable a year ago because of all the big money given away in free agency this offseason made Eric Gordon one of the key players that teams would like, because he now almost becomes affordable. And in that regard, you take a guy like Daryl Morey, who desperately needs more offense and more shooting in Philadelphia, and would love to get his hands on a guy that has done great things while playing for Daryl Morey in Eric Gordon. Philly would be an interesting scenario. Indiana will still look at him for a homecoming. There'll be other playoff teams that would love to see Eric Gordon in their uniform, because shooting is a commodity that every team needs and you can never get enough of. I think the other kind of sleeper in all of this, Brandon, is Christian Wood. Christian Wood played well, but he didn't play a whole season, and he was dinged up, he was injured, and he never got healthy. On top of that, Christian Wood has already made statements that he should be a max player on his next deal. So therefore, while he still has value, Christian Wood going somewhere else could be the sleeper no one's thinking about after Eric Gordon and John Wall, that could end up bringing back some good young players that can help the rebuild speed up even more for your Houston Rockets.